You're listening to The Unsafe Bible with Pastor Ken Brown.
You'll flee by the valley of my mountains, for the valley of the mountains will reach to Azel. That's a little town halfway to the Dead Sea. So it'll open up and you'll be able to go that way. Yes, you'll flee just as you fled before the earthquake in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah. Then the Lord my God will come and all the holy ones with him. By the way, we're part of the holy ones that are with him. Okay, if you're a believer in Jesus Christ, we're coming back at that time with him. We're part of that army.
Have you ever wondered what would happen when Jesus returns a second time? Today, Pastor Ken discusses the things that will happen when Jesus returns. According to the book of Ezekiel, there will be powerful earthquakes that will shake every country. Along with himself, Jesus will come with all the holy ones who were taken up in the rapture with him. There is not much time left. Jesus will return soon. Many people in this world are still unaware of Jesus. How can you begin to share the gospel with others? Well, let's join Pastor Ken in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 40, as he begins his message, Back to the Future Again.
So we're in the book of Ezekiel, and we're in chapter 40. It's back to the future again, okay? Ezekiel is a time traveler, and I'm not kidding. He actually does travel through time several times here in the scriptures. As you take a look at it, you read it, it says things like, tell everybody what you see. Well, if you're not traveling in time, how can you see it? You know, and he tries to explain it to us. Remember, God's over time. He knows all of this. He did the same thing with a guy named John and showed him a battle that took place at the end of the age, could be 10 years from now, and he tried to explain it in terms that he was used to. So he used terms like arrows for guided missiles and things like that. And we saw that Ezekiel does a little bit of that too. But we're in chapter 40. We're going to be talking about this place. This is the temple. This is the millennial temple. Yes, there's a first temple, a second temple. The third temple they want to build right now. In fact, there was a march on Tish B'Av, which was the 9th of Av, Jewish calendar. And a lot of people showed up, and what they were marching for is to begin construction of the third temple. The nation of Israel wants to do that. But this is the fourth temple, or maybe the third if they don't build the third one. But this is the temple that Jesus Christ will rule and reign from. You and I will physically be in this building at some point in time, which is really exciting. And we're going to study a little bit about it. And there's going to be some things that we see that are missing that we saw in the first temple. And we'll see some things that are there that weren't in the first temple. Now, to show you a comparison of the size, at the very top of this picture, there's a little tiny gray box right there. That's the size of the tabernacle, okay? This is Solomon's temple. Now, that's what Ezekiel knew and what was destroyed. He knew that. This is a standard U.S. football field, not Canadian. It's only 50 yards each side and 50 yards wide. It's 100 yards by 50. Canadian is 110 by 55, so a little different. This is the size of Herod's temple. This giant brown box is Ezekiel's. It's a little bigger, if you can kind of pick up on that. Again, here's a comparison of it. The far left side is Ezekiel's temple, and then you see the football field in green, the tabernacle off to the right, Solomon's temple, and then Herod's temple. And what we see when you look at a photograph of the Temple Mount, you see the outline of Herod's temple. And there are a lot of opinions as to whether that's correct or not. It's like anything, when you start getting Jewish rabbis together, if you want 4 opinions, get 3 rabbis. So you'll do well. But let's take a look at the first 4 verses of Ezekiel 40. In the 25th year of our exile, so they've been in exile 25 years now, at the beginning of the year, on the 10th of the month, in the 14th year after the city was taken, so we've got a date, and we'll get to that. On that same day, the hand of the Lord was upon me, and he brought me there. Where? Brought me to Jerusalem. In the visions of God, he brought me into the land of Israel and set me on a very high mountain. And on it, to the south, there was a structure, like a city. So he brought me there, and behold, there was a man whose appearance was like the appearance of bronze, with a line of flax and a measuring rod in his hand. And he was standing in the gateway. The man said to me, Son of man, see with your eyes, hear with your ears. This is why I'm saying he's a time traveler. He's actually seeing it. And give attention to all that I'm going to show you. For you've been brought here in order to show it to you. Declare it to the house of Israel, all that you see. Now, that date that we see at the very beginning of chapter 40, 25th year of our exile, what that amounts to is it's April 573 BC. So if you've got a calendar and you want to keep track of weird dates, there's one for you. We've had several dates that Ezekiel gives us. He's very specific about some of that. Daniel is too. When we study, after we get done with the unseen realm, we'll go to the book of Daniel, and you'll see that there's some very specific dates in the book of Daniel too. When Jesus showed up on Palm Sunday, that was the date that everybody should have been expecting him, because Daniel said, this is when he's coming. And they blew it. They didn't recognize it. So we're 12 years after the last dated prophecy in chapter 32, verse 1. The phrase visions of God also links this to chapter 1 and chapter 8. So he's seeing something. He's being transported someplace. He's going to tell us exactly what he sees. This is an eyewitness account. And he's being transported to a time for him that is way, 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 way in the future. Remember, it's 573 BC. We're in the 21st century right now. But for us, what he's talking about could be as close as 10 years away. Probably a little bit further, but not much. The prophecy, though, is dated in the 14th year after the city had been conquered, after the fall of Jerusalem to Nebuchadnezzar, or Nebuchadrezzar, depending upon how you read the Hebrew. But again, it confirms it's 573 BC. That's when this took place. And again, this is not his first time trip. He's had several. And in fact, there is a book called The Time Travelers of the Bible, and Ezekiel is a big one in that. So, we live in 3.5 dimensions. We know that God probably had 11 or 12 dimensions to create the world. Maimonides, back in the Middle Ages, studying the book of the Torah, came up with at least 11 dimensions, and now scientists are saying there's 11 dimensions in the universe too. So they caught up, I guess. But we live in height, width, depth, and then we have half of a dimension called time. We can't go backwards, we can only go forwards. Unless you're from California, then you can remember tomorrow. So that's just an exception for folks from California, just trying to help out. This is not his first trip. Ezekiel 1:1, it came about in the 30th year on the 5th day of the 4th month while I was by the river Chebar among the exiles, that the heavens were opened and I saw visions of God. And that's where the throne room comes down to him and everything starts and his life changes. Ezekiel 8:3 is when he gets a guided tour of the temple that he just left a few years before, but now he's going to be given a guided tour of the things he didn't know were going on. And here it says, he stretched out the form of a hand and caught me by a lock of my head. What a way to travel. And the Spirit lifted me up between earth and heaven and brought me in visions of God to Jerusalem, to the entrance of the north gate of the inner court where the seat of the idol of jealousy, which provokes to jealousy, was located. So we know he's traveled before. So this is not new. He's an experienced time traveler, okay? Don't know if he has a DeLorean parked out next to the chariot in the garage, but he's experienced at this. The setting he takes us to is post-tribulation. So that's how far in the future he's gone. The tribulation's over with. He's now talking about the millennial kingdom. The tribulation's gone. It's a changed planet. Everything's different. So you can understand some of the things he says. The renewed Jerusalem and the new temple are there, and we're going to have this 1,000-year reign that's getting ready to happen. Now, Ezekiel's taken to Jerusalem. His view is from the north, looking south. Now, he knows what Jerusalem looks like, and he's expecting to see a destroyed city, but he is in the future, after the tribulation. There's been some things that have happened. We've talked a little bit about that. There's been a few earthquakes. Some buildings that used to be there aren't there anymore, and there's a bunch of new buildings. And there's a new guy ruling the whole planet. So he's seeing some things he's never seen before. I love how he says, he brought me there and it looked like a city, a structure like a city in verse 2, okay? So imagine being from Jerusalem of 580 BC, agrarian society, maybe 250,000 people live there, smoke all around it because you've got all these altars going off all the time, and there's false worship going on, and you're taken to the future and you're shown this. This is Jerusalem from the north looking south, just like him. This happens to be from an airplane. I'm on a really tall mountain here. But that's Jerusalem. So if you've never seen that before, well, it looks like a city. I've never seen something like that before. I've never seen a city that large before. He's never seen anything that big. Babylon's smaller than that. That would blow his mind. It would blow mine. I mean, he could see the Dead Sea off to the side. Herodium wasn't there, but there's Bethlehem, Zion Square, Dome of the Rock. That's where the temple would have been, okay? So he sees a big building located where Dome of the Rock is, but he doesn't know what that is. And by the way, the old city, what he would know as Jerusalem, is this area immediately around the Dome of the Rock. Everything else is brand new to him. He's never seen that before. And of course, you see the road to Shechem, but that's what it looks like. Ezekiel would have known the old city, but even if he saw the old city as it looks today, he wouldn't remember it. He wouldn't. Here's the old city, okay? Looking from the northwest. This is the area around it, and again, you've got a freeway here. That wasn't there then. You've got the Mount of Olives is on the other side. You can see it. But there's something else here, too, that's different. We see the Mount of Olives as a whole. He's not going to see that. He's going to see a valley. Okay? So that's something else. Remember, the tribulation is over with. Things have changed. This is not his mother's Jerusalem he's in. Things look a little different. As you can tell, even today, you think this is Jerusalem's a big town. And when you start thinking about it, he wasn't used to the size of the old city, which we now call it that. When Jerusalem was conquered by the Romans, over 1 million people were there. There's more than that now. But things have changed. Zechariah 14 tells us what's going to happen in Jerusalem, probably just before he gets a chance to look at it, okay? This is probably just a few weeks before he actually gets there. Behold, a day is coming for the Lord when the spoil taken from you will be divided among you. I'll gather all the nations against Jerusalem to battle. The city will be captured, the houses plundered, the women ravished, and half the city exiled. But the rest of the people will not be cut off from the city. Then the Lord will go forth and fight against those nations as when he fights on a day of battle. In that day, his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives. We saw that on the other side from the Temple Mount, which is in front of Jerusalem on the east. And here's the kicker. This is what we didn't see in the picture because it hasn't happened yet. The Mount of Olives will be split in its middle from east to west by a very large valley, so that half the mountain will move toward the north and the other toward the south. You'll flee by the valley of my mountains, for the valley of the mountains will reach to Azel. That's a little town halfway to the Dead Sea. So it'll open up and you'll be able to go that way. Yes, you'll flee just as you fled before the earthquake in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah. Then the Lord my God will come and all the holy ones with him. By the way, we're part of the holy ones that are with him. Okay? If you're a believer in Jesus Christ, we're coming back at that time with him. We're part of that army. So here's something that I took a look at some maps. This is the Temple Mount today. There is a fault line that runs through the center of it. And that fault line is waiting for the pressure of a single foot for it to split in two. That is, we know that's there. It's not a joke. That fault line, by the way, when they built the hotel, they purposely built it to the side. So the fault line runs right there, okay? They didn't want to have the hotel split in two, and half on one side of the valley and half on the other side of the valley. They read the book of Zechariah. They know what it says. So they were smart. They put it so it'll be on one side or the other. But that's the Mount of Olives, and it's going to split in two. Just very simply. Of course, there you have the Seven Arches Hotel. They were the ones who were smart enough to make sure it wasn't built in the middle of it. And then you have the Kidron Valley, and on the other side is where the temple's going to be. So the best seismologists in the world don't know when the next big quake's going to hit in that area. But a Tel Aviv University geologist suggests that earthquake patterns recorded in historical documents of Middle Eastern countries indicate the next big quake is not long overdue. It needs to happen. It's been a while. It's like California dropping into the sea. They're saying it still needs to happen too. I have other reasons why I think it needs to drop in the sea, but there's going to be some earthquakes. Well, there's another one that's going to occur too. The fault line, by the way, runs from west to east. It's in the southern portion of the Mount of Olives. It has actually already elevated the mountain northward and exposed layers of limestone and dolomite from specific periods that the geologists look at. And it's the same section that faces the Judean mountains behind it. So, yeah, we know this is the case. I mean, these are scientists who work in Jerusalem, and this is what they do. They're checking out earthquakes. This is not the Jerusalem that Ezekiel would know. He wouldn't know this. He's saying, hey, it looks like a city. It might be a city. I'm not sure it's a city. What do cities look like where you're from? Yeah, he's been taken 2,000 years into the future. He's not all that sure what he's looking at. It looks like a city, but I don't see any cattle. I don't see any carts. I see things moving, big trucks and trains, but he doesn't know. And he may be seeing airplanes landing at the airport down in the distance. But he's been transported to a modern city. Now, God made a promise in chapter 37. He said, I will make a covenant of peace with them, and it'll be an everlasting covenant, and I'll place them and multiply them, and I will set my sanctuary in their midst forever. So we're getting a tour of that sanctuary. My dwelling place also will be with them. I will be their God, and they will be my people. And the nations will know that I am the Lord who sanctifies Israel when my sanctuary is in their midst forever. It starts off in the millennium. There will always be a sanctuary in the midst of the people from this point forward. What God is doing is he's showing Ezekiel what that's going to look like. And the revelation concerning this future temple also deals with the worship and the physical changes in the promised land. It's Israel that's there, not the church, it's Israel. There are some folks who will look at this and say, oh, that's all for the church. No, it's not. This is for Israel. It's for them. So standing towards the center as Ezekiel is transported to the location of the temple, he sees a man. And this man has the appearance of bronze, and he's holding measuring instruments. Now, he's holding measuring instruments that Ezekiel would be familiar with. If it was a modern individual, he'd probably have a laser indicator and maybe a transit. No, I mean, but that's not, Ezekiel wouldn't have any clue what that is. But this man, by the way, is a vision of the pre-incarnate Christ. And I pick up on that because he has the appearance of bronze. He showed up to John the same way in the book of Revelation. Revelation chapter 1, verses 12 to 15, I turned to see the voice that was speaking with me, and having turned, I saw 7 golden lampstands, and in the middle of the lampstands I saw one like a son of man, clothed in a robe, reaching to the feet and girded across his chest with a golden sash. His head and his hair were white like white wool, like snow, his eyes like a flame of fire, and what about his feet, his legs? Like burnished bronze when it had been made to glow in a furnace. So we're seeing the same Jesus that John saw. He's seeing Jesus Christ. He happens to be seeing Jesus before the manifestation of him here on planet Earth. John's seeing him after. But the image is the same. Now, the 2 devices that he's holding for measuring, it says that this man is holding a line of flax and a measuring rod in his hand. So the line of flax is like a carpenter's tape. It's for long distances. That's what he would use. The second one, the rod or reed, is a small yardstick for smaller distances. So he has 2 measuring devices to measure short distances and long distances. And having seen a preview of what the size of this Temple Mount area looks like, and by the way, we will take a look as we go further into this, the territory reserved for the king, for Jesus Christ, let's say a lot of Jerusalem has to move, okay? It will have to move. But these instruments hit at the importance of what's to follow. There is a measuring that's going to take place, and it's important that we see the size of this. It's intentional, it's significant, and we have to pay attention to that. So what we're about to have done for us is the pre-incarnate Christ is going to guide us through where he's going to rule and reign from for all eternity, and right after it was built. So he's walking through it, and basically, I don't know if Ezekiel's got the punch-out list and they're walking through there making sure that it's complete, but I kind of had that vision in my head. This is where God will reside in person. And by the way, you and I will be there, okay? Which is why this is important to understand. So Ezekiel is to take careful note and declare exactly what he sees. So verses 5 to 16. And behold, there was a wall on the outside of the temple, all around. And in the man's hand was a measuring rod of 6 cubits. Now, a cubit is the distance from normally your elbow to the tip of your finger. We'll talk about what that is in actual distance because he's using a royal cubit, not to be confused with a non-royal cubit. You go crazy on this stuff. But he has one that's 6 cubits long, okay? So if this is 15 inches and a royal cubit's 20.5 inches, he's got one that's 6 of those long. And he measured the thickness of the wall, 1 rod, and the height, 1 rod. And then he went to the gate, which faced east, went up its steps and measured. Now remember, the rod is 6 cubits, so we'll get to that. And measured the threshold of the gate, 1 rod in width, and the other threshold is 1 rod in width. The guard room, there's a guard room. Okay, it's 1 rod long, 1 rod wide, and there's 5 cubits between the guard rooms. And the threshold of the gate by the porch of the gate facing inward was 1 rod. Then he measured the porch of the gate facing inward, 1 rod. He measured the porch of the gate, 8 cubits, and its side pillars 2 cubits, and the porch of the gate was faced inward. The guard rooms of the gate toward the east numbered 3 on each side. The 3 of them had the same measurement. The side pillars also had the same measurement on each side. And he measured the width of the gateway, 10 cubits, and the length of the gate, 13 cubits. There was a barrier wall, 1 cubit wide, in front of the guard rooms on each side, and the guard rooms were 6 cubits square on each side. He measured the gate from the roof of the one guard room to the roof of the other, a width of 25 cubits from one door to the door opposite. He made the side pillars 60 cubits high. The gate extended round about to the side pillar of the courtyard. From the front of the entrance gate to the front of the inner porch of the gate was 50 cubits, and there were shuttered windows looking toward the guard rooms and toward their side pillars within the gate all around, and likewise for the porches. And there were windows all around on the inside, and on each side pillar were palm tree ornaments. So we've got a little bit of a description. The wall, though, the definition of the wall, the fact that the wall is there, and this is a big wall. It's 10 feet high and 10 feet thick. It's a big wall. This is sacred space. You only put this together to protect and identify that what is inside is sacred. Now, as New Testament believers, what is sacred space for us? It's us. The Holy Spirit lives in us. The Bible says we are the temple of the Holy Spirit. He's not kidding. We are sacred space, which is why God makes some very serious comments and statements about how we should live. For the Jew, that sacred space was the temple and the temple grounds. Jesus Christ, the Messiah, is going to be ruling from inside here, and God will be here, and so will be the Holy Spirit. So this is sacred space. It's protected. It is the fact that this is a temple compound. And you'll see through most of this, we don't read a lot about heights, okay? But there is concern about the height of the wall. So a cubit and a hand breadth, I said, is 20.5 inches. And they talk about that in the measurements. So a cubit here, and then a hand breadth is this. It's from the tip of my finger to my thumb. So they're using a Royal Babylonian cubit, which is 20.5 inches. And that's the standard. A rod then was 10.25 feet in length. So when they say it's 1 rod high, it's 10.25 feet high. And if it's a rod wide, it's 10.25 feet wide. So this is a big wall.
Today's message was in the book of Ezekiel. Pastor Ken continues his teaching from this major prophet here on the Unsafe Bible. Ezekiel provides many reminders of what it means to be a Christian. Even more impressive is how relevant his example is even today. Not only did he embody what would later be known as a disciple, but he spoke of the end times that would later be penned in the book of Revelation. He also embodies what we mean when we say the Unsafe Bible. The Jews were saved by faith and blessed with a paradise to live in. This was not popular among the locals, and so little by little they began to deny their faith and take credit for themselves. This gained them favor with the world, but God took notice and knew what He must do. You see, the life of a Christian is not an easy one. Not only do you have to deny yourself things of this world, but the world begins to look at you differently, and that can be uncomfortable at times. We want to help you navigate what it means to be a Christian today and to walk in lockstep with God. Visit our website, theunsafebible.com, for more information about us and the Bible. You can connect with us by filling out the Connect form right on the main page. You'll find directions to our campus on the About tab under Contact Us. There's also a link to our email address where you can ask questions or leave a prayer request. We can't wait to hear from you and start a conversation. But for now, we're out of time. Be sure to come back for more from Pastor Ken on the Unsafe Bible.